Welcome to Todd Talk. Today I'm going to tell you about the time I got a tattoo.
Todd Talk is brought to you by Gordon's Noodle Company. It's snakes.
I want to start off by saying this story has some kind of triggery stuff. I'm going to talk a little bit about being injured, a little bit about some controversial stuff, a little bit about death. So if you're not in the mood for that, hit pause and come back later. But if you are, buckle up. So this episode marks 1 year of Todd Talk. It's hard to believe I've done 12 of these things. And you know, the reason I started these is because I figured you guys wanted to stare at more than just this guy. I mean, the Minecraft videos are very fun and I love the community, but I thought it might be kind of fun to be a little bit more real and a little bit more vulnerable and let you guys know a little bit about me. And people in real life seem to like some of my stories, so I thought it might be fun to share them with you. And this is a story I've told many, many times. So I've got a tattoo. I got this tattoo when I was really young, probably as soon as I was legally able to get a tattoo. And this was way before like everybody had tattoos. Back then it was like people who had been in prison and sailors and bikers, and that was pretty much it. But in the early 90s, the grunge scene and the counterculture and all that, tattoos were starting to become a thing. This was way back before there was like a tattoo parlor on every single corner. They were pretty few and far between, and a lot of them were pretty, kind of cliquey, run down, just real weird. So on the recommendation of like a friend of a friend, a buddy and I went to this tattoo parlor to get tattoos. So I'm sitting there getting my tattoo, and I remember this dude named Tom is doing the tattoo. Just your classic long hair biker type. And there's just a bunch of other people, randos, hanging out, and it felt much more like a motorcycle repair shop than a tattoo shop. But he's pretty friendly, we're all hanging out, just kind of chatting. And then these people start coming in the front door, walking across the tattoo parlor, and going downstairs to the basement. You could hear there was a band that was starting to warm up downstairs, and so there was some sort of show going on. And these people who were coming in the front door all kind of looked the same. They have combat boots and suspenders and bald heads and a lot of swastika tattoos. There's definitely some sort of like skinhead punk show going on downstairs. And then while I'm sitting there, I notice this guy just sitting across from me on the couch, and he's just wearing like jeans and a leather vest, looks really drunk. And Tom, the tattoo artist, says, "Oh, do you know who this guy is?" And I say, "No, I have no idea who this is." And he says, "This is El Duce." And I have no idea who he's talking about. And he's like, El Duce, the drummer from the Mentors. And I'm like, I don't know who that is. And then El Duce kind of sits up on the couch, and through his kind of squinty eyes, he says, "You know what you do if you ever get picked up by the police is you shit your pants. If you shit your pants, they'll just throw you right out of the car and they want nothing to do with you." Shortly after that, my tattoo is finished and I went home. Now fast forward several years into the future. I was playing in bands and stuff like that, and I was working graveyard as a janitor. Just worked really well with my sleep schedule at the time. And I was a janitor in a grocery store, so part of my job was like to sweep all the aisles and that sort of thing. And whenever I got to the magazine section, because I was in a band, I would take a minute and I would read through some of like Rolling Stone and Guitar Player and stuff like that. And as I'm flipping through the pages of this music magazine, I see this headline that says El Duce of the Mentors was found dead. So it turns out the Mentors were a pretty influential, really controversial punk band. And El Duce apparently had gotten so drunk that he passed out on some railroad tracks and he got run over. And there below the story is a picture of the same dude who was sitting across from me while I got my tattoo. And that's pretty much it. That's the story of when I got a tattoo. It's not a great looking tattoo. The design's not very good. It wasn't done very well. I didn't take care of it. But I've never bothered to get it covered because every time it pokes out underneath my short sleeve, somebody will invariably say, "Oh, you have a tattoo?" And I'll say, "Yeah, let me tell you the story of when I got a tattoo." And there's some sort of lesson in that. Life is not always good or pretty, but you end up with a lot of really good stories. A couple years ago, I went to San Francisco for a vacation, ate a bunch of great food, went and did some sightseeing. I got one of the worst sunburns I'd ever gotten. I was so sunburned that my forehead was blistering, and if I ran my fingers across, I could feel the liquid kind of scoot through my skin. I remember laying in bed and furrowing my brow and my skin cracking and leaking. You know, at the time, it was miserable. I also remember the first time I went to New York. I walked so much, I had blisters all over my feet, and where my knees would barely kind of brush together were getting raw from so much walking. There was a moment where I just had to stop in Central Park and just sit because I was so beat up and exhausted from how much walking I was doing. But you know, when I look back at the pictures and I think back to the vacations, you don't really remember that misery. Makes for some pretty good stories, but really the good stuff is what you remember. So I'll leave you with that. Just because you're having a bad day does not mean you have a bad life. And when you think back on years and days past, the obstacles make for great stories, but the good stuff is what you really remember.